Hello, everyone. I'm Candid Stanisci, and welcome to CFL Talk. The Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250 is where you can see us. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, joining me on CFL Talk, it's always candid, frank, and live with David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Just ticking off the calendar.
We had our pre-show talk, and we were, oh no, what are we going to talk about?
And then Frank says off the list. I'm just like, oh, I think we're good now. But Frank, I should say after our show last week,
yes,
the thing that warmed my heart the most,
yes,
is I wanted to just check and see what the schedule looked like, and I click on the first Argo game against Calgary, and there it is, a nice countdown, a live countdown. We are. Well, I mean Argos, because I know Winnipeg plays the day
hours
before.
Away, thousands of them, but we're hours.
We're 47 days, 5 hours, 57 minutes, and as I say this, 30 seconds away from a CFL, from the Argos opening their season. I believe Winnipeg just take away 1 day from that.
But one thing I got to say though, North American sports don't do it as well as European soccer does. When they have a game, it's a 6 o'clock kickoff or whatever. It's 6 o'clock, right on. The referee looks at the time, and 6 o'clock, that's when it happens. So the clock might be 5 plus minus minutes as far as the accuracy. I'm just being I'm just having fun with you. So yeah, that's great. That actually the clock's ticking, and you know us, we always like to rain on people's parades. Of course, we're talking about it actually happening, but reality is that it isn't. They're not committed yet to it happening because the approvals, it hasn't been made official, right? So that's a concern.
Yeah, it is, because when you really think about it, they announced the schedule, they announced the season. We know the season's ago, but the real quirk in all this is that there's protocols that the league needs to get approved, like how are the players traveling stuff. What happens if a player tests positive? How do you deal with that? What's the safety going to be like in meetings? Because I'm assuming most of the stuff will be held virtually. Because I even know I spoke with Chris Bolanovich. He's the Argos PR person. He said all press conferences will be done virtually, which I kind of expected. I thought, if you look at the way things are being done in the States, they're still doing virtual press conferences, but this is mostly about their playing protocols. What happens, how many tests have to be done per, do they have to do it per day? Do they have to do it, every time they practice? How do those protocols work out?
Yeah. So the word scrum, for those of you that like watching rugby, that's that word, they use it in rugby as well. So the scrums aren't going to happen where we're going to be holding microphones in players' faces. It's all going to be, as you say, virtual. And by virtual, I don't even know if they're going to allow us at the stadium, David. I'm still not sure that's going to happen.
Well, the way I see it, they allowed. And look, Leaf games are different because it's the Leafs that they usually they need they were allowed to go there. But the Toronto Marlies, when they had their games at Coca-Cola Coliseum, the media, there were people allowed to go there.
Right.
There were writers allowed to go there. So I'm assuming, yes, we will be allowed to go to games, but very limited seating. We talk about, people joke how, Argos don't get a lot of coverage. Well, okay, but the press box now, it gets crammed down a bit. So I think you're gonna see just they'll have to shrink down or how they do that. I'm sure it's going to be the same in other. I'm guessing it's going to be team by team. I
Yeah,
think there'll be the
they're going to
CFL
handle.
will probably allow media there because there will be an uproar if media are not allowed. But it's more so how many, who gets priority, and yeah, you're going to be doing all your press conferences from basically people will be in the press box doing those
Yeah,
virtual
that'll
press
be as
conferences.
close as they get. You
Yeah,
know, they'll basically be on their laptops or their phones, and they'll be taking part just as if they're in their office or in their home when you do the press conferences with the Canadian Football League that we've been doing the
yeah,
way we've been doing it. It's not a question. It's not a question of how close you're going to be. You're just not going to get to be in the same room with them. So it could be 3 rooms removed, 4 rooms removed, an isolated area for the reporters, an isolated area for the players, and that's what's going to end up happening. So yeah, and that's all if it happens, right? So what we're putting the cart before the horse. The first and most important thing is, will I guess if we were to we talk about this all the time. We've talked about it so many times, but why don't we put it in kind of an order?
okay,
The first thing that has to happen is the government has to approve. We get that, right? That's the first thing that has to happen. There has to be approval. But even before the approval, if I can put it this way,
mm-hmm.
they have to agree to allow American football players to come to Canada. That's
Yeah,
the first thing that has to happen is people have to be able to travel across a border that we just found out yesterday has been updated, and another month has been tacked on, or 21 days or whatever it is, has been tacked on to the waiting period before we can have cross-border travel.
yes,
So that will mean that the same kind of situation that occurred during the National Hockey League season, and it's still happening now with the Montreal Canadiens being
mm-hmm.
still in the game, where now they have to get permission and have some ideas on how to isolate. But there have been
Yeah.
some changes made, right? So that's the next thing. The players coming, and what do they have to do to be able to play?
Yeah, because there's, I mean, who knows how many of the players and coaches coming from the States, how many of them have been fully vaccinated? Today the rule, and those that are not familiar with Canada, or when you were coming into Canada, especially if you're a Canadian, you had to quarantine in a hotel until you test negative, and then you're allowed to leave. I think it was a minimum 3 days you pay for a hotel. That's been scrapped for Canadians. I don't know if that means it's been scrapped for everybody else. I'm not too sure about that rule. But my guess is that the CFL, this is one of the protocols they're probably working on, as you're saying. Are they working on getting an exemption for players that are fully vaccinated that maybe they have to do a modified quarantine for. I know the NHL got it down to 7 days when they were doing player movement.
Absolutely.
So they'll be allowed to cross. I don't have any concerns about them crossing because it is essential for their work. They are coming here to work. They're not coming here for a good time. Unfortunately, the protocols aren't going to make this as good of a time as maybe they have been accustomed to down in the States. Um, yeah, so I think the hurdle right now is how long will that quarantine be? And where are the players going to quarantine? Because I don't know about you. I don't know how many of these players have a place to live right now. We mentioned that not many of these, especially the ones that are coming from, this is their first time in the CFL, like first time coming to a city. I'm assuming this is something teams are going to have to sort out, and maybe they just go right to where training camp is. I mean, my guess is if you're doing as you said, let's say the Argos are going to Guelph or York. I'm not too sure. They haven't really given the.
I hear it's Guelph. I hear it's
So let's say it's Guelph for Toronto. It would make more sense for the players to go to Guelph than to have to come to Toronto, quarantine for 7 days. Is there a way for them to go to Guelph? I'm
well.
not sure.
Hmm, that's where I think the idea of a bubble in Guelph has to be created.
Yes.
So essentially, what we've learned about sports and the way it works right now is essentially what has to happen is there can be no interaction between the players coming from another country, being the United States, outside of Ontario. You can go that
Yes.
far. And they need to go somewhere where they won't impact the local people, right? That's the goal. The goal is
Yes.
not to infect anybody else, to remain in a position where they just stay together, they isolate together. So that would be the visiting team, like when they go to Montreal right now.
Yeah.
They isolate the way they do there. The CFL. So if one uses that as a template, and that's the good news here, is that whatever happens in the National Hockey League, the Canadian government can't say to the Canadian Football League, yeah, but that's the National Hockey League. So one can use what's going on in the National Hockey League as a pretty good guideline, right? And a set of measures, requirements, conditions that they need to meet to ensure that they get approval, because they haven't got approval yet. So the American players come here. Do they set up a kind of bubble in Guelph? What's going on in the university in Guelph is the question I have. What's going on there right now? Are there students there? Is
There
there a
probably are.
right? Is there students there? Will what usually happens in that situation is the Argos, I know this from my experience with them, whether it's at York, whether it's at Guelph, they end up residing in the dorms. Unfortunately, to go into the dorms, they have to go past all the students. So there's common areas. Can they create an independent area for the Argo players on the college campus so that they are isolated from the local people at that college? So that's one of the challenges, that one of the first things they're going to have to do in my mind.
Now, Frank, is there a dorm area near the stadium?
I don't know about
I've
Guelph.
never been to Guelph, so
I don't
I've
know
never.
about Guelph. I don't know about Guelph,
Okay.
but I do know that it's a couple of blocks in York to the dorms,
Yes, I
right?
remember
Because
that.
they walk. That image is more strong in my head of walking towards the dorms at York. So there has to be, once they enter, because again, here we go. Our experience, and if I overspeak, folks, I apologize. It doesn't matter where they are when they're outside. Okay, I'm saying that very, very hesitantly. Okay,
Yeah.
being outside is not the issue. It's when you enter the building. So how do you get to the dorms? Period. Right? What is the
Yeah.
travel path that you need to take to go to the dorms? Is there a
You,
That's the question you're asking. Can
yes,
the players be isolated? I assume.
I
I
assume
assume.
so.
I assume so. Here's why. Fire code requires multiple egress and exit, egress and entrance, right? Requires both.
Yeah.
They have to be two different ways to go in, two different ways to come out. Now, that means that probably on a temporary basis, they can have one group of people use that and the other group of people use the other, if that's possible, if that's the way to maintain the 6-foot rule, the 2-meter rule in Canada.
I'll even go one further because because of work, I was very much in the know about how the bubble worked for the NHL. The NHL had two hotels. They had the Fairmont and they had Hotel X on the CNE grounds. This
Right.
is where I thought, okay, do they consider having their practices at the CNE? Do they use Hotel X? Players stay at Hotel X. You set up what like the NHL did, almost like a barricade for the players. They can walk to the field, walk to BMO Field, because we know that's where they do everything. Do they go to BMO Field? Do they maybe practice at BMO Field? We know that they don't like using the grass too much there because they don't want to really chew up too much of the grass. The field, it's like
Lampport's
I'm
not
just
far. They
yeah.
used Lamport. Lamport.
They've
I
used
don't think
now the
Lamport would
problem with
fit.
Lamport though, Frank,
Okay,
to
help me
get
out.
to get in order to get to Lamport, you have to do bus. You
Right,
know, some players like to walk.
right.
You'd have to tell the players no walking. It's a straight shot bus to the stadium. Stadium is pretty secure because it's not open to the public anymore. So from the stadium, you then go back on the bus, back to the hotel. That's how I would assume something like that, where you have a dorm
Okay.
set up. You get even if for any of these teams, You have them set up in one location. You get school buses or however mode of transportation you deem your team can afford and or want to put the money out for, because it's for a whole month of training camp.
Right.
Get the players on the bus, socially distance. That's going to be a lot more school buses, unfortunately, if you're going to have to do a socially distance. Take them to practice. They do their practice. Back on the bus. Back to the where they're going. I think you're going to see something like that. They'll probably have maybe a common area, some common areas where outside where players can do what they need to do, because you're going to need. This is the thing. The NHL did it very well in that there were areas that players could go so that they wouldn't go stir crazy being stuck inside.
Right. On the
Now
roof.
I think COVID was
On
a
the
little
roof.
different though.
They had some
It
game
was
areas
yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
Well,
this
we're getting into
yeah.
the weeds on this. Let me take the
Yes.
weed whacker out and say, you know what? But I think I think the viewers get the point. There's going to be challenges, and those challenges, the good news is it's summertime, right? The good news
Yeah.
is the fact that we can be outdoors is good news. The good news is the National Hockey League and the provinces, a couple of provinces, 3 specifically that were involved in the playoffs, I have okayed the idea that that games take place and fans be present. So we've gone through that in 3 provinces. So now what we got to do is hope and consider that these will open up opportunities, and all that stuff we talked about may or may not be relevant, but it just means it's possible. It's going to take a while. So let's consider that they have approval to have the games, so that we've got sorry, the players to come here, that they can handle them being here, they can handle the separation required, the distancing, social, and for whatever means you want to describe, so they can do that, let's say. So those are the first 2 things. What's the next thing, David, that we need to get up to date with? Testing. They've been given
Yeah.
60,000
Rapid
doses,
tests.
rapid tests to the CFL. So the intent to have the season, that willingness by the government says, here's what we need you to do. We need you to test, and here's a leg up. Here's the test. The next
So
thing is,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, the thing I found pretty interesting about that is, rapid tests are available to the public.
Right.
I know my cousin who works in construction, they sent over a bunch of tests so that they can distribute to their construction workers, so that before they go to the job site, they test themselves at home.
Right. Right.
They've been giving them out almost, I'm not going to say willy nilly, like just
Like candy.
freeload, like candy. But my cousin said he got over around 1,000 tests
Wow.
to use, to hand out, not for him specifically, but
For the fellow workers.
yeah, to order and hand them out.
Right.
So if you're testing every day, which I assume that's probably what's going to have to happen,
Right.
60,000. I don't know if that's going to be enough for. I mean, that might be enough for training camp. If you're,
But David, I'm of the mind that this is not going to go on forever.
no,
We're with another 1 million doses provided by the U.S. to Canada. With every dose that's put in someone's arm, it's another God willing nail in the coffin of this stupid COVID-19, which is all that we're asking. What we're asking for, what we need to happen is keep minimizing the odds that people die from this thing.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in mind. That's the goal. People should not die from this. So as far as the vaccine is concerned, as far as treatment's concerned, all that stuff's improving. Our willingness and ability to do what it takes to minimize the problem, we're doing a fairly good job. I'm proud of, for the most part, Canadians and the way they're dealing with it. Look, there's no group that's perfect. So I want to make sure that we keep moving here on this conversation. So the testing, however they decide, if it's 60,000, David, maybe they have more later if they need them more. This might be just a first batch, and see how well it goes. We know that on that they're talking about 100 players per team. That's almost 1,000. If you count coaches too, that's over 1,000 people. And we're talking about 60,000, right? That's an average of, just for the sake of simple math, it's less, but let's just say 60 doses per person. So, training camp is a couple of weeks. How many times do you test them a day, right? So
I
there
would
you
say
go.
once a day for sure.
So that even if you do it twice, that's 30 days worth of tests, if my math is correct. I'm really leaning on the math thing.
I was gonna say your math is probably better than mine.
I'm really leaning on the math thing. So we've got the testing. So that's all part of the approval process.
Yes.
We then, once we get out of the weeds that is COVID, then comes the players showing up for camp, having not played for a season or two. Probably this season more than any other season, they really need a preseason.
So this is the interesting thing, because they're saying no preseason games, but
I don't mean the games, but
yeah, you're hearing Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. They're planning a scrimmage. I heard that. I'm like, ooh. Now the problem I have with this is there are 9 teams. Which team is going to be left out? Right? I'm thinking it's probably going to be BC, because BC is not close to any of the other cities, because at least Edmonton and Calgary, it's right there. Hamilton, Toronto, right there. Ottawa, Montreal, that makes the most sense.
absolutely.
So I think you're going to see, every team's going to do it differently. They might do inter scrimmage. I think you're going to see some form of a scrimmage, because there's no way you're going to go into the season without any game, any way to test how you. Now, this is the issue here. A scrimmage is not going to be like a game, because what are you trying to avoid in a scrimmage? An injury.
Well, they're not supposed to allow contact in
Yeah.
practice.
This
So
is where I find the
that's
scrimmage
dead.
idea so
That's
bizarre.
dead in the weeds. That's dead. That's dead. That doesn't even come out of the starter's gate, David. I don't think. When you consider you're not allowed to have contact during training camp. Period. You're not allowed to have it during practice. Period. It's not a well, if and there is none of that. You're not allowed. So I don't think that's that's going to happen. But I can understand them looking for permission to do something like that, because of what I said. They haven't played in a while. They need, as soon as they can, to get the real feel for the real game, which is contact. Football without contact is flag football. Right? It's not football. So that's going to be tough. So the protocols. So to review, the government has to approve the plan that the CFL has. It looks like the plan is or can be approved. The next thing is, like we said, the players coming here, getting across the border, having a place to live, isolating, all that stuff. Then they come to training camp. They're talking about 100 players, 60,000 tests. We're talking about 60 maybe per player. So now, how does training camp look? Like, the more players they have, the harder it will be to isolate. Do you think that might be an issue with the government? Might the government say, you know what? I don't know if we can approve you to have 100 people together. Can you work it down to 75? I could see something like that happening. I could see them lowering the number of players in training camp, increasing the taxi squad. And I think that's what they'll end up doing, because I think the problem, David, when it comes to COVID, it's always about how many people are getting together. It's always that. Your church, Tim Hortons, people in my house,
Costco.
right? Everywhere, right? So I think that 100 is going to be a tough pill for the government to pass, because
So
hockey doesn't have 100 players. Remember, it's all about, I am a firm believer of it's the past represents the future, right? You know what I mean? So what they did before, they're going to try and hold that as firm as they can. How many people, when Vegas comes to Montreal, how many people do you think they bring with them? 50?
If you're including coaches, medical,
Their
would
whole staff, everybody
their whole
involved,
staff. Yeah, I somebody said
right?
actually that's a good note because I do believe that the travel party for any NHL team was roughly 50.
There, see, that was
50
just an
dead.
assumption on my. That's my math. So just
Can I think I think I actually have a solution for this.
go ahead.
And he'd done this in training camp before.
Right,
You got group 1. Group
right,
1, that's your group for training camp. So that could be offense, defense. That's one group. You're the starters.
right.
Second group. This is now we're getting into guys that are, they might not be the quote unquote favorites to make the team. You're going to have to break them up into groups.
Oh,
And
interesting.
this group, this is the time you're going to be on the field. After that, you're going to go into meetings. You're going to go and do that stuff.
Hmm.
This group, this is when you're on the field. I think you're going to see something like that because, yes, I think you're going to
And you
see
know what,
numbers go
David?
down.
David, I agree with you, and using my experience and knowledge over this past year and a half,
Yeah.
I think what you might even see is they may be given the freedom to decide who is in each group. And
Yes.
the CFL and the government might not want to get too far into the weeds about understanding who's in what group. So they
Mhm.
just say you have A, B, and C. Those groups cannot contact each other for the first week of training camp.
Yeah.
They cannot be in close proximity for the first week.
That's one bubble.
That's yeah. I could see that making sense too. Okay, so not to get caught in the weeds because I think it's
That's
brilliant
an
what you said.
assumption on my part.
Yeah,
I think
no,
it
no,
might
but I
be.
think it's
Yeah.
a good assumption in the sense that it's all about isolation, right?
Yes.
And from your experience when you ended up with COVID, you had your mother upstairs and you stayed downstairs. So
Yep.
you can be in close proximity, but not in the same place at the very same time. So you can share something because we've
You're
learned that
not.
the
There was
aerosolization of the
the
virus, it's
virus.
not touching things. So you can go to the same places. It's about clearing the air is the priority, right?
They
From what I
basically
understand. So
they basically told me if you have an area that you can use for yourself, your own bathroom, your own, let's say, kitchen. I said, well, I do have a basement. So that's pretty much what I did because you
yeah,
can't, there's certain common areas they tell you not to share,
right,
bathroom being one of them.
right.
Um, I'm assuming that's a very tricky part if you're doing dorm rooms. I don't know if you've been to a university dorm room.
Oh no, I
A
understand.
lot
I
of shared
understand.
space. That's why the group thing.
That's why I didn't want to get into that because it's
That's
really
why the
getting into.
shared groups idea. You have one group on one floor, one group
Yep.
on another floor. Total. I think you can make this
And the
work
teams
pretty
can
well.
decide. We can talk about football in this regard. Then
Yes.
the management has to make a decision because you made it excellent.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you repeat what you said before we talk about what you said.
Yeah.
Now the team has to make a decision. Do they want to keep people separate according to position, or do they want to rank the players in the most, the best players together and the middle players and the players longer shots, or do they figure out, do they figure out what group of players they put together so they have a team to practice together? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and that's why in my head I was saying, so they won't be told. They won't be told who can be in the group. I could see that making sense.
Yeah.
And that would be great. So yeah, you're right. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I'm not this kind of organizer, and I
We
don't want
also
to
need.
affect
I think
people.
it'd be nice if we could have someone that might have, that could explain what the
You got somebody
potential.
on speed dial? You got somebody on speed dial? I don't.
I wish
I
the
don't.
whole Argos coaching staff is new. I got none of them now. It's all new.
Yeah, I hear you. So essentially, I think we've established the players, training camps, some of the options. We've scratched the surface, I guess, and scratched an opportunity to have people scratch their heads now. So now it comes down to getting to the stadium. Montreal now is up to 3,500 people inside.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
inside. What's to stop CFL teams based on it being today that they were, they had 3,500 people there yesterday, right? They had 3,500 people. So, and we're talking about fans showing up there over a month from now.
Yeah.
Basically July, August, a month come next week, right?
Yeah.
How much will things change in that month? If one looks back a month ago at the situation in Canada as far as fans being at games are concerned, we had 0. In that month, we now have 3,500. So a lot can change in a month.
I think so. I'm very encouraged by the Delta variant is the biggest issue right now that we're seeing in especially in Ontario. I don't know if you noticed, Waterloo had almost the same number of cases as Toronto.
Right.
That is a concern. I do know that the premier of Saskatchewan said he wants to fill Mosaic Stadium. He wants it to be. He doesn't want it like their full capacity is about. I believe it's around 34,000, roughly. So that's a lot of people. I don't think we're going to get to that number right away. I think we could get there eventually because look, the Grey Cup. Don't tell me that the CFL doesn't want to fill Tim Hortons Field as much as possible.
I'm
They're
not
going
worried
to
about
want.
the Grey Cup yet.
No,
I'm
I
not
think the
worried
Grey.
about I'm not worried about the Grey Cup yet.
So I think what you're going to see is like 3,500 is the minimum. I think right now that's been set in this country because I even watched when you watch the Montreal Canadiens games, there aren't just people gathering inside the building. There's a
There's
hefty
more
crowd
people
outside.
outside. There's more people outside. It seems.
A little. It makes me a little uneasy seeing them without masks and stuff, but that's a whole separate issue.
They're outside.
They're outside. They're still right close to each other. Not exactly.
They're hugging each other. They're kissing each other when Montreal wins.
They're just like the Italians in
They're insulting
Woodbridge.
each other when they lose. Either way, there's always physical contact.
Yeah. So I think you're gonna see that was the bare minimum. But you're right, Frank. As another month passes, and in Ontario, we're in stages, right? Stage 1,
Absolutely.
we saw little things open. In about a week and a half, we're gonna see stage 2 open, and that's gonna open up a little bit more. I think by the time the Argos start their season, we're getting close to stage 3. And I think by that point, in vaccinations, we're at 200,000 people a day in Ontario. I know a lot of people in Alberta have gone pretty. They've been pretty. I mean, they're a smaller population, so it helps, but they're pretty far ahead too with their vaccination rate. And I think that government, the Alberta government, is going to really push for as many people to be in those stadiums because they're getting the vaccination numbers. So I do think because of, with the CFL delaying the start to its season, you're going to see a lot more people in the stands. I think 3,500 is bare minimum.
Since we started talking about this subject, I've always said, and I will continue to say, it's all about the vaccines. It's all about the vaccination, folks. That's what it's about. The more people that get vaccinated, the sooner we're going to end up back to normal. For those of you that don't want to get vaccinated, be advised that you're making it harder for things to work out. If you feel unsafe getting vaccinated, you have the right to feel unsafe. I want to say this, David, because I do not want to guilt people into getting a vaccination because the weight of the world is on their shoulders. If you have a reason not to be vaccinated, God bless you. You have that right, to say no. But I truly hope, what I hope is that the decision people make in not being vaccinated is based on the reality of the situation that they're in, not about simple fear. We're all entitled to be fearful. I understand that.
And the opposite way around too.
Yeah. And I'd hate to think that we don't move forward because people are afraid. People have a right to be afraid. I'm not taking that away from people. But if it's only about being afraid, it's not. It's something you really need to basically figure out how important your life is and how important it is to the people around you to get back to normal. So you have a right not to take the vaccine. No one has a right to force somebody to take a vaccine. The only time that's the case is when you become an impediment to other people. We've had We have situations where people, whatever, they have reasons not to, that sometimes I don't think are reasonable, but that's my opinion, and I'm not here to talk about that. So the vaccinating is very important. The fact that everybody gets vaccinated the second time is just as important, right? The second version, because people coming together, it's about the variants now. Now what we're talking about is you need the second jab because you want to ensure that you don't pass along the second variant. That's, the variant, I'm sorry, because there's some that are that believe that the variant, I forget the number. It doesn't matter, I don't think.
This one's the Delta variant, the new one.
Right.
They go by.
Right. So we've got to fight this thing, and as CFL fans, decide for yourself, but don't procrastinate. Okay, that's the one thing I'm going to say here is don't procrastinate. Don't wait. Even though you're not afraid, even though it's a good idea, but you just can't get over the hump emotionally, right? Just try to remember you're doing it for a good reason. If you have no question about the safety of it, if your fear is more, I'm just not sure based, educate yourself and find out whether it's a good idea. So once we do that, David, right? Once we get people, we minimize the opportunity of the transmission of the virus. Even in stadiums, right? I can see in stadiums, I could see being told to wear a mask when you go, if they open concessions. I can see the concessionaires wearing masks. I can see people going to concession to buy a beer wearing a mask, right? I can see that in my head right now. I can see that happening. And there you go. So it's quite possible, in my mind, come August, I believe there'll at least be one. This is my prediction. There will be at least one stadium that will be 50% capacity, at least one.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you're going to see that. I mean, I look at the Euro Cup because I compare, people like to compare Canada and the US situation. Totally different. I compare us to Europe.
Because of the vaccine rollout, right?
Because of the vaccine rollout and the variants that they're dealing with and how they're kind of dealing with the vaccines and how people's mindsets are like.
We've made mistakes. We haven't had as much vaccine as we want. They haven't had as much vaccine as they want.
In France, they had a curfew a few weeks ago, right? That annoyed a lot of people because they wanted to go to the French Open. And I don't know if you've ever been to tennis matches. They don't have a set start and end time. And there was a lot of
like baseball.
So sorry, people. You all have to leave now. This tennis match is still going to go on, but you have to leave. They actually did that, but then they had to make concessions about that.
And then the one game where in the middle of the match, they said, guess what, folks, you don't have to leave. And the big cheer that happened.
Yeah, exactly. It was more of a cheer for the fact they didn't have to leave.
We're not leaving. We get to watch. Yay.
Like the players are probably going, you guys don't even cheer this loud when we're playing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I look at the Euro Cup right now. There are a lot of stadiums that are at about 30 to 4, I think 30%, 25 to 30%. I think some are at 50.
I don't think Rome was much more than 10 or 15 though.
I think Rome. Yeah, Rome was very. I mean, Italy has been very
sparse. They were pretty sparse.
Like England, like Wembley Stadium was at about 25, I believe.
Yep.
So like they're not even like that's who I compare us to because they're
moving. They're moving. That's today. That's my whole point. It only gets better, and I really don't believe that it's going. Oh God, I shouldn't have said that. Knock on wood. I really don't believe it's going to get any worse. I have faith that it's only going to get better. It's only a question of how quickly it's going to get better. I just think in my tiny little brain, that's what I'm thinking. It's not going to get any worse. Yeah. There's a good chance it's not going to. A 90% chance it's not going to get worse.
I just see people rushing to get vaccinated. That gives me a lot of hope. Absolutely. A lot of people, like the vast majority. The ones we need for herd immunity that we keep talking about, they're going for the vaccines.
Absolutely.
So that's very good.
Do the best you can, folks. No one can force you to do anything. But don't be afraid because you don't have the knowledge or you haven't approached the truth. Okay? So that's up to all of you out there. I'm just saying that the sooner we all get vaccinated, the better. That's just an opinion. That's a target. It ain't. I'm not demanding it at all. All right. So that's pretty much it. And then it's hitting the road, crossing provincial lines. That's going to be the next challenge. Because we do have the situation where just recently Manitoba and Ontario's border has been opened. So Winnipeg coming to Toronto, again, if you're going to allow foreigners, people outside of Canada, to come into a province, it shouldn't be any more difficult. See, here we go again, where I say something's happened before. Why can't it happen again? And if the template's set, so there shouldn't be anything to stop football players who play for Winnipeg coming to Ontario to play football. Now, I understand the schedule and all that stuff. We've talked about it. Everything, and I'm going to pat my own back here really hard, okay? Because I said this months ago. I've been telling David, I've been telling Jared, I've been telling everybody who's listened to me about the situation and where we're going to be. It's only because I've paid a lot of attention to COVID and what's going on with the news that we've done. I only extrapolated information that I had from there to here. So CFL fans, I can see us even going to road games, David. I could even see that happening as well, just like we saw in Montreal. They had Vegas fans there. They had Leaf fans there in Montreal. We had Montreal fans here in Toronto. I'm trying to remember, there were Montreal fans in Winnipeg.
Well, they would have had to have been Toronto-based Montreal fans that were, because those were healthcare workers.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm making the presumption that if they're wearing the jersey, they're coming from that place. My bad.
Well, we know there's some traitors among us. We know.
So that's the other issue. And we haven't even talked about if we can get away from COVID now, because we've spent
a lot of
talking on COVID. And I have like 10 things we want to talk about.
Don't worry, we'll get to. We got lots of time to get to
camp and about here's what we'll be talking about in the future. So we'll just tease you with a few things. We'll let you know what we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks. Okay, gambling approval in the Senate. We're going to give about 30 seconds to each one as a tease. Yeah. We're going to be looking into the gambling approval by the Canadian Senate, how it impacts the Canadian Football League. We talked about it a little bit. It's on the floor. They're starting to discuss it. We'll see what happens with that. Your 30 seconds, bud.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Senate. Good Lord, that is not riveting television to watch. Do not recommend it unless you have to do it. They're still debating the whole idea of match fixing and gambling addiction. Those were kind of two of the big issues that they were bringing up. So the amendment to talk about amending the criminal code for match fixing didn't get approved, but they still haven't approved the actual notion of single game gambling. So that's happening tonight. They have up until 9:00, because once 9:00 happens, they can't vote anymore. That's where we could potentially see something happen tonight. So by the time we come back next week, I'm hoping we have a resolution either way on this subject.
And we've talked about border crossing. We've talked about the protocols. We haven't talked about jerseys, uniforms, whatever we want to call them. This season, there are going to be, you mentioned the Calgary one, but there are going to be a lot of uniforms that are going to be new. The Argo logo is new. Yeah. The Edmonton Elk is new. BC's talking about another jersey. So
just BC, yeah.
We can talk about all those new jerseys next week. We'll try to get that subject and talk about the jerseys that are coming, which will be really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'm a jersey person. I love looking at jerseys. I would like to see what the history of the jerseys and how they've changed in the CFL, because they've gone through drastic changes. I'm looking behind you, Frank. You got a few jerseys behind you, right? So
yeah, that's like 1/10 of what I have.
Good Lord. Maybe that's what we'll have to do. You'll have to take them out of the WeWork.
I have to reinforce the shelves to put the rest of the jerseys up there, but there's not enough room to see them. I'd have to have a stadium behind me. But never mind. Well, I've got anyway, look, I got
we'll talk about that next week for sure.
Yeah, so the Argos, the schedule. You asked if there were any interesting quirks in the schedule. There, we'll talk about that as well. I want to mention this as well. I have it on good authority that the Argos did not vote against the return to play. And I just want to say this, that I'm very disappointed not in Argo fans, but in how deeply they've been marginalized, how the Argo team and the Argo fans have been marginalized to the point that if anybody says anything bad about the Toronto Argonauts, people believe it, and I posted something on Facebook, and I was hoping to hear somebody say, no, why do people assume, and it really is frustrating, because this organization, the Toronto Argonaut organization, has so much work to do to undo so much damage um, that has happened to this organization in recent memory. You know, with the ownership change, with the way that they had road games instead of home games, all this silly stuff that's gone on that has been damaging to the Toronto Argonauts and their respectability. I just want people to know that the Argos were not against opening. They were not. I have it on good authority. I believe the people that told me that. So I believe that. Also, Chris Larson. We talked about it. I said before, and I constantly, this is my thing. This is my thing that I believe more than anything, and that infuriates me more than anything, is people being guilty by accusation. It is the most horrible thing. If you've ever felt it, trust me, folks, it's very painful, and it's a stench you can't remove. And David off air, says Frank, thanks for making sure that you made that point, that he wasn't right, David. But David is a nice man, God fearing, kind person, and good people can't see. People like David can't see how demonized people can be, because it's not in his psyche to be like that. I have been demonized. I have been treated in a way that is not fair. So I know how it works. So guys like Chris Larson, he's going to suffer from this forever. Forever. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But a lot of people there's going to be a group of people that say, well, he got away with it. There's going to be people that say, oh, they just couldn't prove it. And David, that's why it hurts so much when I see these kinds of things, because innocent people's lives are changed forever. And here's the worst part I want to share with you when it comes to that, why I'm against that kind of stuff. It goes in here, and self-doubt is a killer. So when you're accused of something like that, you buy into it. You believe you deserve it, because some people are self-deprecating. Some people have a guilt complex for whatever reason, and accept insult and accusation as if it belongs to them, because that's all they know. So there are a lot of people out there who are victims to this kind of behavior, where we assume guilt, where we broadcast they did something wrong, and we think a simple call like, oh, well, that's the way it works. They were found innocent. It's all great. No, it's not. They were still attacked, and they still feel the pain, and people around them use that against them. So David, that's my little how do you feel about the Chris Larson thing?
So what threw me off about the whole situation, and I'm glad, and as you mentioned, I was glad that you brought in the other perspective about this, because we heard he gets identified on social media.
Right.
Then what happens right after that? The team suspends him. So guess what? Alarm bells start going off in your head.
Right.
I understand why the Red Blacks were, I guess, probably felt the pressure to do something and to put out a statement saying we are gonna investigate and we're gonna wait for the way that let the authorities do their job. Guess what? In some cases in today's society, that's not deemed good enough.
Right.
In this situation, I mean, when you really look at everything that was put out there, I mean, for someone to point him out specifically, it really that threw me off. I will admit that. The suspension note threw me off. The CFL statement threw me off. I think, yes, there was a lot of quick judgment. It's happening a little bit too much right now. I do feel for Chris Larson, because he's had to get a lawyer to come out and put his reputation right now, as you said,
had
is
to prove he's innocent.
Yes.
Do you know what that's like, having to prove you're innocent?
Not hard, not easy. It's so difficult because social media, it can be a good thing, but it has proven to be a very it's a tool that spreads a lot of things that should not be spread.
Right.
The
But
issues
David,
in society right now
let's make
have
sure
been amplified for
but
sure.
David, make sure we talk about this. This
Mhm.
is as important as it is what I said about Chris Larson. It's important to note that somebody was assaulted.
Oh, that
All
yes,
right? Somebody
the
was
pick
assaulted because of
who
who
they
they
are.
are, as opposed, well, there is no excuse. There's no
No,
excuse for assault.
none.
So let's remember that. There was a victim. Just because the perpetrator wasn't Chris Larson doesn't mean the victim, it didn't happen to them. We always must leave room for the victim to be heard. All right. But again, they can't be believed until there's proof that they're telling that until there's proof. Guilt by accusation is a killer of our society, and
Yes.
it's killing us now. I have this thing, I rail against cancel culture. Cancel culture to me are the people who just don't care about other people. They assume the worst and go to the worst possible, punish somebody for, like, this guy lost his job because somebody said something, right? That's cancel culture to me. When people who are innocent are presumed to be guilty and then their lives are changed, that's cancel culture to me. That's a culture of people who know they're doing it. There are people who know that they're doing it. They know they're ruining somebody's life and they're enjoying it. And those people should not have the tools to do that kind of thing. And
What
that's
I'll say,
period.
what I'll say is, um, the person who accused him has every right if because he was in that because he didn't say he wasn't there. He
Right,
was there, but he was proving that he was trying to prove that he wasn't involved in what happened. The
right.
person who's accusing him knows the person was there, gets assaulted, so that's where that
Came from.
association happened, right? If the person who's accusing has the evidence and is able to
Put it
testify,
forward.
put it forward, they very much should because no person
Absolutely.
should have to live with what they've been through. And the issue here is people who don't know the situation, people who weren't there, who don't have all the facts, are pushing for action to happen. Well, and I think this also has to do with the lack of faith in the justice system to get it done properly
Oh,
too.
it
And
has earned a lack of faith.
yes, it does.
It has earned it.
So I really hope the person who was assaulted brutally and should never have been, I hope they get some form of justice.
David, the other problem
Yeah.
is, I'm going to interrupt you because this is important to get out there. An assault can be, all right, you can spit on
Verbal,
somebody, it's assault.
physical,
You
mental
can
assault.
you
Yeah.
can touch somebody. Literally just touch somebody. I can, just like I'm touching my phone. That's
Hey,
assault.
careful.
And you can stab somebody, you can punch somebody, you can beat somebody up with a stick, you can bring them to within death's door, and that's assault too.
Mhm.
So when people use the term assault and you see it on TV, you see it on the radio, you read it in the newspaper, everybody subjectively inserts what they think that assault was, right? That's the other thing that needs to happen, that the media needs to do. If an assault happens, if they're going to say it was assault, then there has to be a direct description of that assault. Because if the assault was somebody slapped somebody in the face or slapped somebody in the arm, right? Or somebody stabbed somebody, there's a big difference.
Yeah.
There's a big difference of reaction that you have to assume is going to take place. But anyway, that's all I want to see. That's the other thing I want to see is I want the assaults to be, they need to be, there needs to be a guideline to say assault 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's to me what is ludicrous is that the word assault covers too many wide areas. So that what happens is you do one thing and all of a sudden everybody thinks that someone did this instead, because we all gravitate to the worst thing, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. No, definitely.
And an apology to Chris Larson from the Ottawa Red Blacks is required. They suspended him. they should explain to, if he's innocent, if it turns out he's innocent, he really is innocent, they owe him the same kind of attention they gave that when he was suspended. They should give him in bringing him back and say, because society needs to get used to the idea that not everybody who's accused of something actually did it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to keep going over, otherwise our producer's going to have you.
We're over anyway. Eduardo,
our...
we're done anyway. But this is something someday I'll have the bravery to help people understand even better how it works,
mm-hmm.
and how the legal system can be corrupted. It can be corrupted, definitely. All right, Eduardo, we're ready to go out. It's late anyway. Thanks, David.
No problem, Frank. We'll talk more about this next time.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk live Mondays at 1 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network, CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer. Check it out on SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you for watching. I'm Candid Frank. Have a great day.